basically stopped NEP. And that's what's happened now, is people who've sunk their money into Russia are losing it. And the same thing's going to happen in China. All this investment in China is going to end one day, and China is going to close us out. We're going to lose all our investment in China. All of our property in China is going to be nationalized, and our economy will be at the point of collapse. Even our money will collapse if the Chinese do this. Okay, next.
I just want to focus on one thing, and where these present wars in Afghanistan and Iraq started was 9/11, and I believe that our own people with special interests in the United States and other powers in Western Europe created the downfall of the two buildings of the Twin Towers. I've seen pictures I got here at the Granada Forum where there's an explosion underneath the fire created by the two jet planes. And so who created this? I mean, I can't believe it would be anyone from Russia or China.
Why not?
No, I don't. That's why not.
Okay. Let me just, suggest, I've heard these rumors and these conspiracy theories, and every time I go and I look into them about 9/11, they turn out to be totally spurious. And people keep inventing these things, and they keep going out, and people keep latching onto them. What we have to do when we look at reality is that we have to not have a preconception about how the world works. We have to just look at the data and see what the data means in itself. If we already have a preconception, see, if we already have a devil theory, if we're already projecting our shadow onto the president of Pepsi-Cola or the Rockefellers, then we already know how everything happens. We don't even need any facts. We can just manufacture facts to fit our theory. The reality is that the head of Pepsi-Cola may be a bad guy and he may be cheating people. But his evil is different than the evil of someone who wants to blow up the United States. Because, see, he may trade with China. He may give technology to China or have deals with China. But in the end, he just wants to sell Pepsi-Cola to 1.3 billion Chinese. There's a limit to that kind of evil, rotting China's teeth.
Well, in '93, when the federal building in Oklahoma City was blown up,
that's a different topic.
The same people did the Twin Towers.
Okay,
that could be the BATF.
See, there's you got to have evidence for that. See, when you make a statement, you have to have evidence.
Okay, you said that the people in here will be dead in a few years.
Yes.
I would believe it would be from interests in our government.
You know what's interesting to me is that Chinese generals and the former head of the People's Republic has made the statement that war between China and the United States is inevitable, and that war will probably be nuclear. Russian generals and leaders have made similar statements. Vladimir Putin, when he was running for president, here's the two ways that he used to run for president. One is he said, oh, it's a tragedy that the Soviet Union collapsed. And the other thing he did is he led an all-arms nuclear war exercise. Now, would the President of the United States lead an all-arms nuclear war exercise to get votes? Vladimir Putin won by 70%. Running on a nuclear war platform, you could argue. I mean, that's probably an exaggeration, okay? But you see, the thing is, these countries really are arming. Why does Russia have all these weapons? Why is China building the largest military force on earth? Why? If they just want to trade with us. Why is that? And why do, when we read their secret intelligence memoranda, it refers to future war with us? The fact of the matter is that everybody who accepts this idea that America is blowing up itself and that America is so evil that it did the Twin Towers itself, I mean, that's anti-American propaganda, and you're believing it. Yeah, but the overpopulation isn't here. See, again, if it smells like it's anti-American hate, if it's pointing to demonizing America or America's leaders, be suspicious of it. Don't trust it. We're all Americans in this room, and if we're going to survive a war, we have to be united. This kind of stuff is made to divide us. In this book, Viktor Suvorov makes a statement that during the Great Terror, They have a giant propaganda apparatus already set up to try to convince the American people not to trust their own leaders. By creating scandals, by leaking all the files they've accumulated on all our leaders, leaking everything they can to make our leaders look like liars, that we can't even trust them. So that our armed forces can't function because our armed forces won't trust the leadership. And so this is very important to understand, that sowing distrust between ourselves, between Americans, is one of the key things that an enemy will do before a war.
Carlos and the other gentleman over here took most of my question, but I wanted to ask you in particular, why would the international bankers continue to support the Russians and the Chinese who would have fallen a long time ago if they had not done that, unless they are fools and they're trying to weaken the United States and so they can create a world government?
The short answer is because they are stupid. No, they are stupid in the way every single human being is stupid. We all have our knowledge and our expertise. Financial people, their world is money. They believe in money. Financial people are soft. They are bourgeois. They do not understand terror. They do not understand. Look, they are not out there at Chevron Oil pulling toenails out of shepherds, Arab shepherds. They don't do that. See, they didn't get into the oil business in Arabia with terror and killing and murder. They just simply made deals with people. That's what business people do. They sit down, you know, they got the suits, they got the briefcases. They're not pulling out revolvers and shooting each other. It's not the Russian mafia. This is the way they do business. It's very different. It's bourgeois. You see, their world is bourgeois and their conceptions are bourgeois. And as a result, they have a blind spot. They think that they can buy everything. They can't. They can't buy these people with guns in China and Russia. They don't realize that the trade they're doing with China, they are selling the communists the rope. Lenin talked about it. He said, I know the communists we will sell them the rope to hang them with. And in fact, what he didn't even know is that we would loan them the money so that they could buy the rope from us. So they didn't even need to get the money. It's not even their own money they're buying it with.
In other words, they're playing a very dangerous game.
It's a very dangerous game. It's the great misunderstanding, the great tragedy that leads to the Third World War, which began on September 11th.
Thank you.
As I understand, all of these, you see all these boxcars like Costco and Yin Yang and whatever, and all these seaports.
Yeah.
And also there are a lot of trucks coming over the border from Mexico and trucks coming over the border from Canada.
Yes.
But they don't inspect all of them. And I understand they're smuggling in drugs, weapons, and even, I believe, the advance team. You say young guys, military age.
Yes.
And since I understand Costco is the fundraising arm of the People's Liberation Army, I believe they're smuggling in soldiers, spies, saboteurs,
Yes.
all kinds
Absolutely.
of subversives. So I'm telling people, they're not going to just wait until they can jump out of airplanes and parachutes.
That's right.
Like the old-style war. The advance team is already here.
Already here.
They're already here, just waiting for their marching orders.
That's exactly correct. That's, you know, of course, these Chinese front companies control the Panama Canal. They run the Panama Canal. The Chinese run it. And it's interesting. They are putting together a communist bloc in Latin America. Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. I interviewed his air chief of staff and his pilot, Major Juan Diaz. Major Diaz told me that Hugo Chavez is a Marxist-Leninist. He's a communist whose objective is to build a communist bloc in South America as a base for attacking the United States from underneath.
That's the president of Venezuela you're talking about.
Yes, Hugo Chavez. He's a close friend of Fidel Castro.
That's right.
They have taken over Brazil. Lula da Silva of the Labor Party there in Brazil. And they've made an agreement with Kirchner in Argentina. They've got Evo Morales, the head of the cocaine growers in Bolivia, about ready to take that country. They've got Ecuador. They're trying to draw Peru into a war with Chile, the one holdout country. And of course, if they get all of South America except for Chile and the Guianas, they got a tremendous base, and huge amounts of of Chinese money are pouring into Venezuela. And Mexico is another story.
Another scary thing is that all these communist countries, including China, the obvious communist countries, they're all members of the United Nations. So
Yes.
the United Nations troops can consist of our communist enemies as well as...
Yes, well, they manipulate the United Nations. They manipulate it and they try to use it, and they try to get the third world to be anti-American, to go against America. They try to, and now they're getting Europe and Latin America to go against us. They're trying to isolate us. Because you see, before you can destroy a people, you must dehumanize them, blame the world's ills on them, and completely cut them off from help. And then you can come in and you can slaughter them. And I'll tell you what Colonel Lunev told me. He said in 1992, the general staff in Moscow had a meeting. They said the war plan against the United States is still on, only because we are reducing our forces. We are only going to take Alaska and parts of Canada. China is going to take the lower 48 states. And he said various third world countries would be invited in for looting rights. That is their division of the spoils for this country. And they will show no mercy when they come.
And the scariest thing is that we're the only country that will stand up to them. And so once they take the United States, they can conquer the whole world.
Absolutely
and
right.
China alone could even occupy
That's
every
right.
country in the
I mean,
world.
if you look at the military power of the world, of the countries, okay, Russia and China are weak compared to the United States. But if the United States is somehow taken out of the equation, the rest of the world combined cannot stand against the combined nuclear might of Russia and China. They are simply too strong.
Thank you very much. Good.
Yes.
While I was waiting, I think I forgot some of my questions. One of the things I'd like to ask is what's happening with Laval and that situation with China and the nuclear secrets. I don't know if you covered that. And then the other one is if you know what's happened with Felix Rodriguez and Terry Reid, what they're doing now, and how about soft wars with Charlie Smith?
Oh, yes, I know Charlie.
Okay.
I used to work with him at WorldNet Daily.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't followed what happened. I know that Terry Reid was vindicated in his trial. I did know that much. But I haven't really followed him after that. He's kind of disappeared off the radar screen. Felix Rodriguez is in retirement. His name came up in the Iran-Contra scandal hearings. In fact, that's why the chief of CIA operations went to jail, Claire George, because Claire George lied to Congress about hiring Felix Rodriguez for that operation. But they never brought out this business of Rodriguez being a double agent because the CIA is basically incompetent when it comes to counterintelligence. And this has been seen again and again. I mean, Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen are only the tip of the iceberg about moles inside our intelligence community. And your question about Laval, there's been a huge transfer of technology from China. I mean, from the United States to China. And this is a very serious matter. We had the recent scandal where this Chinese female spy, she was a Republican down here somewhere. She was sleeping with her FBI control agent and milking him for money. And then she slept with some big manager in one of our nuclear labs. I mean, this lady really got around. And who knows what she stole. And I'm not sure if they're going to even be able to convict her. It's kind of interesting.
Are they still planning Atlanta out here, Atlanta, where they were going to bring in the stuff and the double highway through and everything through the United States?
You mean Long Beach?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, out there.
Yeah. Well, I know that the Long Beach thing got stopped, but they're in there anyway. So I don't know how they arranged it, but the Chinese are in a lot of our ports.
Yeah, we were on the hearings when they closed the base.
Yeah.
A lot of us were down there at the hearings.
The importance of controlling ports, I'll note that I talked to Colonel Lunev about this, who was involved in planning a lot of these World War III ideas. And he said that the model for invading the United States was Hitler's invasion of Norway and the Brandenburg Regiment. Hitler smuggled in, because Norway had this close economic relationship with Germany, that Germany had this plan that their troops could enter as tourists into Norway in civilian clothing, and then they could arrive and there would be secret safe houses and warehouses where the Germans could put on their uniforms, get their rifles, and there would be whole regiments of German troops inside Norway that could capture the ports and capture the airfields, and then they could fly in and ship in heavy weapons. So that would be part of the plan here, too.
I would like to hear if you can elaborate on the past and the future, if there is you know, any activity in the future of the Hitler German philosophy of driving to the east for resources and room and you know, agriculture and all that, and you know, tying that in to how your Arab extremists like Zawahiri that you mentioned, if there is a dynamic between the Germans and the Russians in terms of this philosophy that, you know, most people think about when they think of Hitler and World War II, if there is the Arab component that looks to form a strategic alliance, you know, if there is a coming together between Germany and Russia.
Yes, well, Russia wants Germany to be its strategic partner, as I mentioned before. As far as latent Nazism, it's hard to know whether this would ever be revived in Germany. It would be contrary to Russia's interests. As far as the Arabs go, there are some interesting facts about who trains some of the leading Islamists. For example, the East Germans and the Cubans were responsible for training the Islamists that tried to take the Grand Mosque in 1979. So it was communists, and a lot of them were East Germans who did this. And of course, the East Germans are still there. It's just that they're part of Germany now. And it looks almost as if East Germany is swallowing West Germany rather than the other way around. It's a very clever thing that's gone on. So we'll just have to see.
You're certainly a very interesting person, by the way. And I have enjoyed your lecture. I don't necessarily agree with everything you say, naturally. But I'd like to know a little bit about your background, your qualifications, and then I have a couple questions I'd like to ask you.
Okay. I was educated at the University of California. I was in a PhD program there in political science, sociology. And it was there that I started to study weapons of mass destruction and Sovietology. And I ran into some problems because there were a lot of communists in the university. And I didn't like the kind of poisoning of, you know, high intellectual thought. My book is fairly sophisticated. So I basically left graduate school to work on this book. I worked on this book from about 1989 to 1993, in which case I knew that there wasn't going to be any receptivity to the late 90s, and I knew nothing really was going to happen. Russia had a long course of going through these changes before it was going to be re-geared up for a war kind of thing. And then in '98, when I saw evidence of Russia starting to re-gear for war, for example, the Russians started putting extra fuel tanks on their fighter bombers and in-flight refueling capability, so their fighter bombers could reach into North America. And they started like gathering the textile industry, slaughtering their fur herds so they could create uniforms. And there was different evidence that they were starting to bring out a whole new generation of weapons, more advanced than what we have. So far, we don't know if they produced a great number, but we know they have the prototypes. So I saw this and I said, okay, now I'm going to bring the book out. And so then I brought the book out. I worked as a consultant for Newsmax. I worked with Colonel Lunev. I did quite a number of articles, and I worked for WorldNet Daily for 2 years, writing about Russia, writing about what was happening. I ran a newsletter for a while. I now currently write for Financial Sense Online, and I have my own website. So
very good.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in government service, like CIA or any of those organizations?
No, I've been in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
But that was a long time ago.
I
more than 20 years ago.
take it from a comment you made a few moments ago that you don't believe in conspiracies, or the conspiracy.
What conspiracy specifically?
Well, would you qualify that?
Well, see, I mean, I believe there are many, I mean, there's probably somebody plotting to rob a bank right now. That would be kind of
Well, we're talking about politically, like the Illuminati. Do you believe that there's Illuminati?
Well, okay, yeah, there was an Illuminati. Adam Weishaupt and all those people in Bavaria, sure, of course, there was an Illuminati. The real question is, there's this idea that some people have that there's some kind of grand conspiracy, that all conspiracies are somehow connected, okay, and interlocking. And there's a centralized somewhere, there's a group of 9 black magicians or Kabbalists or something in a room, and they control through the Masons and other secret societies, and they control everything that happens on the planet.
Do you believe that, or you don't believe that?
No, I don't. I have researched it, and it is an old idea, an idea promoted by the Jesuits in the 19th century, and advanced by Robert Welch, for example, in the 20th century, and others. I do not believe that that theory is true. I'm sure these groups existed. I'm sure that they were promoting their ideals. I'm sure there is an occult counter-movement. There are secret societies. There is occultism. It is real. There are people who not only are involved in perverse sex, but in perverse forms of worship, like worshiping the devil. So I don't dismiss this entirely. There are these things. The thing is, the evidence is very unclear how extensive it is and how involved it is in all of this. I will say this, however, that I believe that the most dangerous conspiracy, the greatest Antichrist movement in history, was Marxism-Leninism. And that Marx was, although I don't believe he was a Satanist, he was animated by demonic ideas. That his most favorite character in literature is Mephistopheles. And he was very much like these dark things. And Marxism-Leninism is a very evil philosophy when you get right down to it. It has been very destructive. No religion, no movement in history has killed more people. In the 20th century, it is thought, the Black Book of Communism documents it, between 80 and 100 million, maybe more, died in the communist countries, were killed by the communists. This is a staggering number of people killed. And the persecution and the loss of freedom, these are very dangerous people. And the idea that they just simply gave up in 1989 and 1991 and went away, I would exercise great caution about this. Great caution.
Yeah, you indicated that you don't believe that there's a movement within our government, say maybe a covert movement within the intelligence agencies and so forth, who are involved in this terrorist movement. I took it.
Yeah, I would say that, I will quote Victor Suvorov, who told Christopher Story 3 years ago, they met. And it's very interesting. He gave the same answer that I'm going to give to you, which relates to what I said earlier. He asked Suvorov, he says, was the collapse of communism in, Russia and Eastern Europe, was it fabricated? Were our secret communist structures still in control over there? And Victor Suvorov said, yes, of course, it's obvious. And Story said to him, well, then you work with the British military, you work with British intelligence, because he defected to England. Don't they understand this? And Suvorov says, no, they don't understand it. And Story said, well, why don't they understand it? And Suvorov said, because they are stupid. See, we have not only a moral decline in this country, we have an intellectual decline. People don't read books, they watch TV. Right. And TV is garbage.
Do you, you kind of skirted the question I was asking. Do you feel that, I'll just be very frank and very blunt, do you feel that our government, a covert operation, was involved in the car bombing of the World Trade Center 93, Oklahoma City bombing, and now the 9/11?
Well, the Oklahoma City bombing is complicated. John Doe number 2, I know Bill Jasper, and I had a long conversation with him about this, and he believes John Doe number 2 was an Iraqi intelligence agent. So this is very interesting. There's such a thing called false flag operations. I'll give you an example of one. Let's say you're Timothy McVeigh, and you're this patriotic American, and you hate the way the government's going and everything, and I'm an Iraqi or I'm a Russian or a Cuban agent or something like that, and I say, you know what, I could recruit this guy to attack the U.S. government. See? It's called a false flag recruitment. You get that guy to attack his own government. See, our government's not perfect. We've turned to the left. We've done all kinds of things that are wrong, that need to be changed in this country. So it's really muddied the waters. It's made it very difficult for us. We can't defend ourselves because we've got such a messed up government. That's part of the reason. But as far as the U.S. government being behind it, I think
No, no, I'm not saying U.S. government, I'm saying a covert group within the government.
Well, the U.S. government has been penetrated by organized crime, which is piggybacked on by foreign intelligence services. There's a lot of compromised people. There's a lot of, I mean, I've talked to former East Bloc agents, and they, you know, I mean, it's shocking. I mean, it's easy to recruit Americans. We're so materialistic, we're so greedy, and so it's very easy for them to build a huge agent network. 24 years ago, John Barron of Reader's Digest wrote a book on the KGB, and he used the following estimate. He estimated there were more than 50,000 communist agents in the United States. I would say that figure is well over 100,000 today. This is a huge number, just a huge number.
Well, you're starting my question now. Do you feel that there's people within our government who are involved in these terrorist activities? Within the government? Like,
within the government?
Yeah, I'm talking about like maybe CIA and FBI.
I don't know of anyone specifically, but I'm sure that there are agents, foreign agents, that are working for the enemy, which means that they could be involved in this.
You mean spies within the agency?
Spies and agents of influence and others, yes.
So you don't think there's a conspiracy within our government to become involved and to be active in this terrorist movement, like, again, 93, World Trade Center and Oklahoma City?
A conspiracy within our government, who specifically by?
Illuminati maybe, or the Satanic movement?
Okay, can you name who they are?
Well, let me just give you an example. If you will go back and check the October 28, 1993 New York Times, you will see where the FBI not only knew in advance about the World Trade Center car bomb, they furnished ingredients for the bomb to a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer who was an informant with the terrorists. Yosef, of course, was the head terrorist,
yeah,
who had Islamic connections. Now that was a FBI supervisor. Mm-hmm. Also, on the bin Laden situation, there are two FBI agents in Chicago, Roberts and Wormer, who were told in no uncertain terms that under no circumstances should they continue their investigation into the criminal activities of Osama bin Laden. They were told this by their supervisor. Mm-hmm. This has come out publicly.
Well, I would say that I would...
Let me finish just a minute.
Okay.
And we have Colleen Raleigh in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who was forbidden from getting a search warrant on Missouri.
Yes.
And we have Keith Williams in Arizona, who had information about the flights, that the Middle Easterners taking training but not wanting to land or take off the plane. Those are my points I want to make.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Moussaoui case, and obviously this is a case of stupidity. But there is always the possibility that the FBI has dirty people in it, and that these dirty people are blackmailed and they are beholden to organized crime, foreign agents, terrorist networks, that they would then use their influence within the FBI to stop investigations. Just as Felix Rodriguez was a double agent, the possibility of double agents in our own security services could be used to sabotage our own investigations, and this has to be considered. We should not jump to the conclusion because the FBI makes a mistake that that mistake is necessarily malicious, because we know that government, these are people who are not paid to work.
Well, don't you think it's unusual